There we go. So it's going to record everything that we see so far. So I'm going to go back again. And it's not available for me, so why not? Oh, there we go. Screen share. Go back to here. There we go. So, so this week, what we're going to do is we're going to cover lesson 10, which is the mixer brush. That's this tool right here, or if you see my mouse here, that's this one. And the first part of the lesson, that's the mixer brush. You'll see in the start file, you'll see in the background and layers, you'll see an image of a palette, and you'll see an image of some tubes of paint and some brushes. You'll also see above that the paint layer, and that's where you're supposed to paint. And then on the layer on top of that are those little circles so that we can actually apply paint in between. What I have done for this lesson that I recommend that you do when you're working on this lesson is that you switch from essentials to using painting. And when you do that, it brings up the brush menu or the brush panel. We also have available for us over to the right over here. Actually, it's right here. Here's brush settings. Yours should be, if I take this and I put this over to the side here, that's there. There we go. So here are brush settings. Let me move this over a little bit. I'll close that in a minute. So what you need to do to work on this lesson effectively is obviously open the file. But what they have also done for this lesson is they have provided for us some custom brushes that can be used specifically with the mixer brush. Not all brushes can be used with the mixer brush. And where those are to be found is that if you go to the brush panel to the right and you click on this little flyout window, what you can do at the very bottom or near the bottom here where it says import brushes, they have supplied for us a file of brushes to be used with this lesson. Also, later on, if you find that you really like working with a mixer brush and create your own custom brushes, you can do that as well. You can export selected brushes and import them at a later date. So what I want to do for today is to import these brushes. And it should take me, it's taken me to the wrong panel. So what I need to do is I need to go to my desktop because I brought some new ones in the other day. And you should see here, here's, let's start 195. Here we go, Adobe Photoshop 2019 lessons. These are on my desktop right now. I've already downloaded them to my desktop. And if we look at lesson 10, you can see that here is a CIB landscape brushes.abr. So that just stands for Classroom in a Book, Landscape Brushes, and the .abr extension is the important part. That's the part where you can create your own library of brushes or import brushes. And that's what I did the other day. You can go online and you can find some free brushes. You can also create your own brushes and save those as well. So I'm going to select Classroom in a Book, Landscape Brushes, and open them. And we can come back over here to Brushes. And let me scroll down. And you can see I already have another one here. So here's the one here. This is the second one. And when we open that folder, you can see that we have a round fan brush. We can see that we have a brush for clouds, and they have created all of these custom brushes for the green grass, for the foreground tree, the background tree, and so on and so forth. This is what we'll use in a minute. Today, what we will also do, besides this demonstration, is that I have a lynda.com video that I want you to see on a slightly different method of converting photographs to digital paintings, because that's basically what we're doing here. So what I want to do to start this is I want to select the round brush to get going here. Let me close this other one here. Close the impressionist brushes.
Sorry, how did you add the new brushes to the Photoshop?
Oh, okay. Good question. You have the brush panel open.
Yes.
You see brushes? You see this little fly out window right here?
Yeah.
Little series of lines. Click on there. And down at the bottom here, it says import brushes.
Okay.
That's where you go. And then you just go inside the lesson and select that ABR brush, which just stands for Adobe Brush. Okay. So now what I can do is I can select this round brush. And the way that this works, which is really pretty cool, I'm going to hit the right bracket. There are two bracket keys to the right of the P key. This is the right one, and that enlarges the brush, and the left one reduces the size of the brush. And what I want to do is I want to mix paints on the palette just as if I were mixing oils in a painting class. So what I can do, and I want to use the mixer brush to do that, but before I do that, I'm going to go ahead, and I had success the other day by just clicking on the eyedropper tool and picking up over here, for example, red. So I have red in my foreground color. And what I'll do over here is I'll go back and I'll select the mixer brush, and then making sure I have the correct layers selected, I'm going to go ahead and paint in here. And let's see. I want to make sure, okay, I have to undo. I don't want to sample all layers. That's not right. Don't turn that on. So let's go back here, and I want to load the brush right now with red. See the little button that I clicked up here? That loads the brush after each stroke. So I've loaded the brush with a red, but I'm going to turn that off. I don't want it to load well, I do want it to load right now. There we go. And now I can paint with that. And I've got red, okay? So what if I wanted to create an orange? Well, using your primary colors, red, yellow, blue, we can create our secondary colors. So what I want to do is I want to mix the red with a yellow, and I can either pick a yellow from my color picker here, or I can go over here and I can create a yellow from here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix in here. Let's see if it works. Now I have to unload that. Let's go ahead and mix. No, it's not working for me. So hold on here. I'm going to use a different brush. And I think that will be, I'm just going to go to general brushes for a minute. I'm going to select this brush here. And instead, I will use that. So let's try that instead. No, let's go back here and let's load the brush with the yellow. And now let's go ahead. Let's see, it's not working. Let's load the brush. Let's turn this one off. Let's try. Let's see if that works. No, it's not working. You know what? I'm going to open. No. Not working for me. Let's try again. I'm going to start with yellow or start with a red. And it is mixing them, but not the way I had hoped. Let's turn that off. Let's try that now. And if I work with it enough, I should wind up with an orange. So let's try a different approach here. Let me go ahead. It has to do with, I want heavy wet mix right here. And it has to do with whether you load the brush after every click or not. And whether you use this one here. This one cleans the brush after every stroke. So I don't want it to clean after every stroke. But I do want it to load after every stroke. So let's try that one again. I'm going to click here. And then I'm going to select. There we go. Let's use the eyedropper. And I'm going to select blue. And let's pick the, there we go. Now let's work. And that's not working either. Damn. I want this turned on. No, none of these are working for me. It worked beautifully yesterday, and I'm not sure what I've changed in my settings to make it not work. So let's try again. Heavy wet. Let's go ahead and load the brush with blue. This might take a few tries for me. I don't know why, but it will. You know what I can do? Let's do this. I'm going to go and I'm going to open. Gotta move a panel up here. File open. And we'll look at the settings in the finished one. So let's look at the start finished example for a minute. Come on. Open. Did I open the right one? No. Wrong one. Palette in. That's the one that I want. So let's go back here. So this is what you're supposed to get that I was getting beautifully yesterday. Let's go back here. And let's create even a new layer. And let's turn this one off. And let's try again. Let's turn the circles back on. And I have the soft round brush here. Let's go ahead and paint with the blue. Okie doke. So I've got the blue selected. Let's go back with and select the eyedropper tool, select some yellow and switch back to there. Now let's draw on top of that. And let's see if it's working for us. And if I keep painting on this, it should turn to a nice green, and it's not working. Oh man, well, you guys are gonna have to not follow my instructions, but go look in the book because it will say, I'm forgetting myself, I'm trying to go from memory, which isn't a good idea, I guess. To go from these settings here, this is gonna be the key. You know, are you going to clean the brush afterwards? Let's load it. To be able to mix the colors together so that the result ends up like this. Okay, so that when you mix the colors together, when you mix red and yellow, you get orange. When you mix blue and yellow together, you get green. When you mix red and blue together, you get the violet. So my settings are incorrect here, and I was using, they were working perfectly yesterday, so what can I say? They're not at the moment, so I'm not going to waste more of your time, but what I will do is I'm going to open the other two files for the landscape, the start, and the end. And this I know we will have more success because we're going to work on top now. So this is the final result of what we're supposed to get. Okay. And what we start with is this. So we start with a photograph of a landscape with some trees and grass and a nice blue sky. And what we want to do is we want to not work on the original layer, same as we've worked with photographs, but we're going to work on a brand new one. So let me make a copy of this one, and then I'm not going to work on this layer, but I'm going to work on a brand new layer on top of that and turn the bottom one off. This time I do want to sample all layers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down and make sure that I am using, for example, let's work with a clouds layer. And I'm going to come back here and paint. And notice that I can, and it's kind of a nice fluffy kind of brush. And if I want, I can work with the fan brush. And we can smudge those paints like crazy. And what I'm doing is I'm basically eradicating the underlying painting. If I want to come back with a fluffy brush for clouds, I can do that and paint on top of that. Okay, and it's painting, it's not eradicating our bottom layer, but just painting directly on top of that until I get a desirable result. Okay, so that's the clouds. Then what I can do is let's work with, for example, the foreground tree brush. And I can come back in here and I can begin to paint and eradicate, but using the underlying colors and using the colors that they provide us in the brush to create a more painterly approach to our trees. And I'm trying to work not with a mouse, but with my touchpad, and it doesn't look all that great, but that's okay. If I just work with single strokes, I can see that it works kind of nice. So what we're doing is we're gradually eradicating the underlying photograph and painting on top with a more painterly look. It's my thought that if you create something that's a little bit more impressionistic, you're going to get much nicer results than trying to do something that's photographic. Okay. And they have other brushes here for the background trees, so I can come back. It's a little bit smaller. We can paint in here. I can work on the background trees. I mean, you can work on, use the brushes for anything. I would recommend using those brushes for, if you decide for your next assignment after the movie poster to do a digital painting, I would recommend using these brushes or downloading some additional brushes off the internet to get the desired result, so that what you do is you wind up with this. Okay? So that's what we're working with here. If I go back to my landscape again, I can come back with the soft fan brush, and I can, if I use the bracket keys to make it a little bit bigger, you can soften that. And it's pulling some of the colors from what I had used before, and that's quite okay. Okay. So let's clean the brush if I want. Let's try that again. And if I'm unhappy with any of this, as long as you haven't changed the background, what you can do is you have a tool down here. You have the history brush. It's just beneath the clone stamp tool. We have the history brush and we have the art history brush. If we use the history brush, I can paint on here, and look what I'm doing. I'm just bringing back my original photograph from underneath. It's like erasing my painting to the original photo. If I use the eraser tool, that's a very different animal. If I start to paint here, notice that it's not doing anything because I'm on a blank layer. But if I move to the copy of my layer and I begin to paint, that's not what I want. I'm getting transparent pixels in the back. So I'd rather use the history brush and bring everything back if that's my goal. So let's go back up here. I can, bring all of that back. And try again. Okay, let me stop sharing for a moment and see if there's any questions before I move on. Any questions? No? Raise your hand, or you can add the chat, or if you have down at the bottom here, you should have a Q&A. So if you want to submit a question, you can do that. No? Okay. So what I want to do next is to show you a slightly different way of working. And that's going to be from the lynda.com videos. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to come back over here to, let's go, I'm going to add this. You can't see what I'm doing here, but I'm going to go to the Los Angeles County Library. So if you have already gotten your library card and you want to do online learning, you can view this yourself. So let me go back now. Let me go back and share and show you what I'm doing here. I'm going to share the screen. And we're going to look at this one right here. So this is the online library from the LA County Library. This is something that I handed out at the very beginning of the semester. So what I need to do is I want under digital library here, I want to explore lynda.com. And I'm going to already have my library card and my PIN number put in. Let's go ahead and connect, and hopefully I connect. And what I want is learning digital painting.
In the previous chapter, we looked at it.
So what we're going to do here, let's scroll down. And we're going to start here, interesting reality with digital painting.
Painting from life. Ooh, this is where it can get a bit scary for some folks. Now we're not making things up as an abstraction and what's in your mind's eye. No, now we're interpreting reality, something out in the world. So why so disconcerting? Well, now we can compare our results with what is directly in front of us. Proportion becomes particularly important. If the proportions in our rendering are off, we can see the distortions compared to reality. Notice that I said we are interpreting reality, not duplicating reality. If all you want is an exact copy of what's before you, then take a photo and be done with it. Remember, we are using digital painting to express ourselves. Expression includes the way we view the objective world, distortions and all. If your current level of drawing includes the inaccuracies of proportion, don't be discouraged. Use it as part of your expressive interpretation. With the fear of inaccuracy out of the way, let's take a look at a few options for painting from life. Still life as a painting genre has a long history reaching back to the late 16th century. Back in the days of long drying oil paint, the still life was a particularly attractive subject to artists. Still life arrangement could be set up and remain unchanged for as long as needed. The popularity of still life continues to this day, and it's an easy to set up subject for digital painting. One important thing to think about is how to choose objects that have meaning to you or act as a metaphor. By using objects of this type, you can create an image with internal meaning. For example, I've selected this vase as the main subject and the star of the show, and it has meaning to me because it's a nod to many of the still life paintings that I've used as inspiration over the years. The other objects in this scene are supporting actors. They have smaller shapes, taking advantage of the idea of repetition, which is always a good thing. The final element is the lighting. This is important for creating drama and focus in our scene. You can see as I'm working through the sketch of this still life that even with these simple elements, I can start to create a painting that has drama and depth. The great thing about a still life is that as a thought out and balanced composition, It looks good just sitting on the table. As such, you can leave it set up for extended periods. This allows you to work on the painting over multiple sessions, as well as have a pleasing arrangement in your environment. There are times when the perfect still life is either temporary or in a location that isn't amenable to digital painting. In these cases, you have the option of bringing the still life home via photography. Practically everyone has a camera in his pocket in the form of a smartphone. Take advantage of this valuable tool to bring still life subjects into your studio that you can then paint in plein air. Now, this is the photo that I took for this course, and it is a highly set up shot. But let's just imagine that this is in a antique store somewhere, and I've asked, is it okay if I shoot this? They say, okay. So I'm looking at this, and one of the things I've learned to do is when I'm going to set up a shot and go ahead and photograph it, I always make sure that I frame it with a bit of extra space around it, because you never know when you're going to wish that space was there. And I know from experience that if you bring home a nice tightly shot still life, there are times where you're going to just wish so much that you had some extra space to be able to adjust to. So it's nice to incorporate that into your photo skill set so that you can have that extra space around by always starting with a slightly widened shot. And let's go ahead and get the crop tool, and I'll show you what I did do here. I did scale this down a bit. I was just kind of looking at where the edge of this is, and there was a lot of extra air on that side. So I just slightly changed it like that. And then that's now my cropped shot. That's one of the first things that you want to consider. The other thing you want to do, take multiple shots. And sometimes I will slightly change the angle of my camera. For example, you can see the angle that the piece of wood that all this is sitting on is at. I might have, had I been in a real life situation, I probably would have also done this so that the camera was a little lower, so that there was a little less of the shelving showing, just to have the option. Again, you want to think about what's going to happen later, not what's happening right now in the still life. So you've got to be thinking dualistically. Yes, you want to be in the moment and photographing, but you also want to be thinking in terms of things that could be items you might want to change in that composition later on. Another thing I'll do when I get a photo like this back in the studio, I have an iPad that I will put the image on. In the case of wanting to paint this, since I can't set up my studio in the antique store, I can set up this photograph and then use it as my still life. I can't modify it by moving my head position around to change perspective or anything, but I now have that set up still life that I can reference while I paint. One of the things that attracts us to any image, in this case still lives, is the lighting that it is under. And sometimes it's the lighting is as much what attracted your eye as is the composition. So in those cases, be sure you do your best to capture that lighting. And I will do that by doing several exposures. I'll do one that's a bit underexposed and one a bit overexposed. This just gives me a reservoir of more potential to work with within the composition. So try to capture lighting and make sure you do several exposures of it. Because we all pretty much have a camera in our pocket, get into the habit of whenever you see a still life, don't think, oh, I'll come back and get that later. Take it at the time you see it. There's so many missed shots in the world by people who think they're going to come back to take that photo, and they don't. Always stop and take that photo at the time you see it. Otherwise, you're never going to get it. Also, don't be worried about high resolution. Yes, it's nice to have a super high resolution image where you can go in and look at the skin of that orange, amazing detail, but that's not as important as just getting the composition and the lighting. The resolution is secondary, so don't be finicky about getting.
That's something that's important about working with, can everybody hear me, I presume? That's an important aspect of working with digital painting, is that in the past when we've worked with photographs, the resolution has been really important. I've made sure that everybody works at a minimum of 200 pixels per inch, but you should be working ideally at 300 pixels per inch. With digital painting, it's not so important. If you start working at 72 pixels per inch or 100, you'll be just fine. And your images will print beautifully. So that's the one point that I wanted to kind of drive home to all of you for this next lesson.
Getting a lot of resolution in a shot. I've gotten so used to photographing any interesting subjects that I see while I'm out and about that I now have a whole camera roll on my iPhone of all kinds of potential still lifes and landscapes. Once you get into this habit, you'll be amazed at what a world of interesting subjects there are out there. Painting from life often means getting out of the studio environment and working en plein air, which is a French expression for painting outdoors. Considering the portability of today's tablet technology, this is an attractive painting from life option. While we'll be working with our in-studio still life, let's take a few minutes to talk about digitally painting en plein air. First off, find a location in which you can work in the shade if possible. This is to provide maximum brightness of your tablet display. You can either use sketching to record the basic composition, then complete the work in the studio, or do the complete painting on site. Use a layer for the sketch and then add color on an underlined separate layer. If you're interested in more about plein air painting, I recommend going to digitalpleinair.society.com for tips, ideas, and artwork. The portability of today's digital painting devices is driving artists in new directions. The ability to work virtually anywhere has only become possible with the advent of tablet computing. Hey, the future's so bright, I gotta wear shades. Digital painting apps, which have a tendency to emulate traditional media, also have another side that I describe as through the looking glass. This aspect of digital paint enables techniques that are not possible in traditional media. One such technique is what I refer to as dipping a paintbrush into a photograph. The mediums of painting and photography have pretty much been mutually exclusive of one another. Sure, you can paint on a photograph, but the high detail photograph and the overlaid brushstrokes remain distinctly separate. In the realm of digital painting, it is possible to have the expressive characteristics of a brush interact directly with a photographic surface. Imagine a wet oil painting that happens to be in the exact configuration of a photographic image. Now, take a dry brush with all of its expressive nuances and apply this brush to the surface of the wet oil paint. Using this brush, you can modulate the precise photographic character of the wet paint imagery into an expressive painting. This is dipping a paintbrush into a photograph, and we'll take a look at it in this chapter. When painting traditionally, an artist is simultaneously juggling several conceptual balls in the air at once. First, there is the composition. Even if it is a basic pencil sketch that has been drawn on the canvas, there are still many times when it needs to be adjusted during the painting process. Next, he must carefully ensure that the applied paint color is as intended. On top of these tasks, he must be cognizant of the expressive quality of his brushstrokes as they are applied. That's a lot of balls to be juggling at once, and it is part of the skill set of the traditional artist. The digital artist, as we shall see, has the option of separating these tasks. So I'm going to be speaking to the idea of isolating your brushwork from your composition and color. And part of the way that's done is that when you are working from a photograph, as we are in this particular chapter, as if the paint is just wet and we can affect it with a dry brush, before you start doing that to your painting, you want to massage the photograph to be the best it can. The image straight out of the camera very rarely is exactly what you're going to want to work with when you begin to paint on it. And so I'm just going to show you one simple example, but I will talk about other things that are often necessary to correct. in this image, I've artificially kind of jacked the brightness of it up a bit so that it's not really what I want. So at the bare minimum, you're going to want to do something like take a filter. In this case, I'm going to use curves. And I'm just going to go in here and I want to kind of give it a little more dramatic feel. It's a lower lighting overall. And maybe readjust the highlights in it again. Right there. So if I turn that on and off, you can see what a difference that makes. This is a much more dramatic reading now of the image than it was when it was kind of washed out. So not only did I increase the color saturation, but I also lowered the overall exposure as well as increased the highlights a bit. So that's one thing. Now, what I can't show you in this image, but I can describe to you, are other things. Like, please, for example, if you take anything with a horizon line in it, make sure that horizon line is even. No painter is going to paint a landscape with an uneven horizon line in it. And just because the camera may have been tilted a little bit when you photographed an otherwise great landscape, don't get all excited and start painting it only to realize later on that you didn't correct the tilted horizon. That's a dead giveaway. That's a signature look of a camera. A photograph that's tilted always gives you a horizon line that is not correct. So breed that out of there. Use the tool that corrects for straight lines, but fix that. The other thing that can happen is, and this isn't always true, but particularly in architectural work, you can get into a situation where you're getting a keystoning effect. For example, a house can be looking like it's kind of getting smaller as it's going up into the air. If possible, you want to take those things out. Now, yes, I will admit there are times where you're doing skyscrapers and whatnot, and it looks pretty cool to have those vanishing lines going up into the sky. But most painters do not paint architectural scene as if it does have camera artifacts from the lens in it. You want to breed those out once again. The other thing you may need to do, sometimes it's required to get the storytelling that you want in a scene. You may have to composite multiple elements from different photographs together to get the image you want. But these are all things you want to take care of prior to digitally painting. Once you've got all of the color and composition work done, you can concentrate solely on the expressive interaction of the brushwork within the image. When using photographic imagery as the source for a digital painting, it is important to initially massage the image with any tonal adjustments prior to dipping your paintbrush into it. By doing so, you can concentrate fully on the expressive character of your applied brushwork. And hey, it's far easier to juggle one ball than three. Assuming that you've already composed and tonally adjusted a source photograph, you can now concentrate fully on the expressive character of your applied brushstrokes. Rather than simply grabbing the nearest digital paintbrush and start dipping into your photo, you'll want to first try out some brushes to determine which ones fit the expressive character you are seeking. Let's do this right now. So the first question you want to ask yourself, assuming you've been using an application like a Photoshop or a Painter, is there any brushes that you already use in normal painting that you like? And I'm going to show you a couple that I like. So this is one that has a lot of nice character in it. It's kind of a raw brush, and you can see it does a little bit of picking up color as well as mixing it in the brush. The other one I like is this sloppy brush that you can see it's got a lot of very interesting character going on within the strokes. So these are brushes that I like, but I want you to be sure you find brushes that you in particular like or have experimented with, and looking at them as actual brush strokes is the first way to evaluate a good brush. If a brush has very good expressive qualities applying paint, then it's likely that that same brush is going to be expressive when it's just moving existing paint, in this case, in the form of a photograph, around. Now, this isn't 100% always going to work, but most of the time, brushes have a way to turn off applying color and only pick up color. it depends on the brush engine that's being used and which application you're in. So I can't guarantee you 100% across the board that any brush you love as a painting brush is going to necessarily work as a dipping your paintbrush style brush into a photograph. But chances are it does, and you may have to do a little bit of research to find that out. Just to give you a little bit of guidance here, I'm going to mention two titles that I've done. They're both in my digital painting series. One is Transforming a Portrait, and that's primarily done in Painter. So if you're a Painter user, you might want to check that title out for a lot of the nuances that we're going to be doing here. And if you're a Photoshop user, my digital painting Street Scene is another one. And both of those just go into extreme depth about a lot of this. So whereas I can't really go into depth here, those are the titles I would point you to if you want more information. Okay, let's go ahead and clean this off. And I'm going to go to my image now. Let's get this a little smaller so we can see the whole thing. And I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. There is a big thing to me about not working at 100% all the time, and I'll show you why here in a moment. I'm going to start with the sloppy brush, and I'm going to readjust it. I want it a bit larger here. It's right around 200. That's pretty good. And I need to adjust it so that it's not going to pick up paint, and that's just a simple tweak right here. Now I've got a brush. If we go in here, let's go ahead and see what's happening. It's really messing around with my image. The one thing I want to point out though is do not go in at 100% and work on one of these, because here's what can happen. You can think, oh, look at this. This just looks like abstract painting. I'm getting exactly what I want here. Well, let's back out and look at the whole thing. And yes, while it's changing, it's not as big of a deal as you thought it was at 100%. What I'm recommending here is be sure you back out from 100%. If you've ever seen a painter working in his studio, he doesn't stay with his nose to the canvas the entire time. He brushes some strokes, he steps back, he goes up, brushes some more. Sometimes he'll walk all the way to the back of the studio and look at it. He's looking at it and evaluating at different scales. And that's very important to do. And if you spend all your time at 100%, you're going to be quite often very disappointed when you back out, and you'll think, I did all of this amazing abstraction with my brushes, and when you back out, it doesn't look that different. So just be aware, you don't always want to work at 100%. It's not useful. And in that light, I am going to go ahead and use this, but I am going to do it so that I can see the whole painting. In fact, I'm going to even take it down another notch, or just a little bit more. And let's go in here and start to paint. So you can see that this brush does a lot of changes to the image. And yet, when I'm done, I think we'll still all agree that this does look like basically the subject matter that I started with. And I'm not going to spend a great deal of time here trying to do this whole thing. I just want to give you enough of an overview of it so that you can see how this starts to work. Now, one of the goals you do want to consider is when you're finished, every pixel in that image should have been touched by your brush. You don't want any of the signs of a photograph showing up in that image. And the reason for that is there's a whole vocabulary associated with painting, one element of which is sharp focus. And if you leave areas of sharp focus, like see right in there, that's just a little bit of that high frequency, high detail that the more you get the rest of the image worked out, there's another one right there, they really stand out. So you want to decimate essentially anything that's photographic in this image. And that's very hard to do, particularly if you come from a photographic background. You've spent a whole career getting sharp, in focus imagery, and now I'm telling you to go the opposite direction and destroy all that detail. In fact, what happens in a dipped into painting like this is that the brushstrokes actually become the resolution in the image. So you're no longer using the subject as your resolution. It now is the brush strokes within the image. And I'm just going to do this very quickly, but I want to do enough of it so you can see like, yeah, that's doesn't look like a photograph anymore. Sometimes I can go over these and kind of break up those edges. That's another thing that is very common in a photograph. Objects and things have very distinct edges because the lens doesn't know how to interpret it other than exactly what it sees. And if there are nothing but straight, sharp, focused lines in it, that's what you're going to see. So here I've pretty much taken all of the photographic character out of this. Now, I may want to instill some detail back into it. So sometimes you have to play a little bit of a shell game. And again, I go into depth with these in some of my other courses. See, there's another one of those right there. We need to get rid of that. Okay, let's go to the original photograph. And I'm still going to work on another layer. And I don't want to get all rolled up into exactly what I'm doing here. It's more for you to really kind of see the transformation that happens. And I need to go in here and I want to make sure this doesn't have a lot of color on it, if any. So I'm just going to do a small area of this. I'm only picking up where I'm touching. So I want to bring back just a little bit of this detail, but we don't want it there photographically. If that's what you want, then just keep the photograph. I want it painted. And this is where I'm not worried about composition. I'm not worried about color. All I'm worried about and considering at this point are my brush strokes. And I'm not even thinking in depth about them. I'm just responding to what I'm seeing and reacting with my hand. So let's just do this little one segment here. And I think then you'll see how I can start to reinstate some of the finer detail, but it is in a painterly expressionist manner rather than a photographic, highly detailed manner. Let's turn that underlying image on and let's back out of here. So this is a very quick demonstration of this, but this is by no means a finished image. But you can see where I've taken the photographic language out of this image and replaced it with that of a painterly vocabulary. And then I've begun to reintroduce some detail back into it, but once again, not at the photographic level. That's the thing you have to learn how to keep a throttle on. Don't go all the way to reinstating it back as a photograph. Otherwise, why are you even doing it in the first place? No, the goal here is to express yourself through your brush strokes in concert with the image that you are applying these expressive strokes to. There's something almost intoxicating when watching a brush affect the perfect realism of a photographic image. I still experience this exhilaration whenever I'm engaged in this activity. The ability to fully concentrate on the brush's expressive qualities without the burden of color and composition can make for a very powerful, creative environment. While the basic technique of brush dipping gets the job done, it is destructive. That is, it permanently alters the original photograph. You were working on a copy, weren't you? You should, if you weren't. A superior technique is to keep your expressive brushwork on separate layers. This is the non-destructive approach, and it comes with several benefits. Let's take a look. Now, first of all, you have to realize that, as we looked at a little bit in the previous video, you must have an application that understands how to pick up underlying color. It can be separate on a layer, and that's ideally what we want, but some applications, brush engines don't allow that. You have to actually work on the image itself. In that case, what I'll do is just make copies of the image and work on the copies where I can. Now, Painter happens to be especially good at this. It was designed from the ground up to be able to pick up underlying color, and it's invested in, I'd say, a good 85–90% of their brushes. There are that 10% that, oh, don't you wish it worked that way? But it doesn't. So in some cases, you just cannot get away with it. But that's an exploratory expedition that you need to go on with your application to figure out how can I best pick up color from underlying layers. By building up your painting in individual layers, you get the maximum flexibility. Each time you need to think differently, like going from broad strokes to intermediate strokes to detail strokes, each time you make that shift, that is the time to create a new layer. That's when you should be considering, I'm going to create a brand new layer here that I can work on. Now let's just go through this image and I'll show you what I did. You saw this previously. I did that, which, okay, I can tell what it is, but it is pretty minimal. Then I went on and I applied intermediate strokes to it. So this is where I go back in and now I'm starting to restate some of the detail, but in this case, it is now in a painterly language rather than a photographic language. And then finally, and here's where I really enjoy this is not even picking up color. That is just white that I applied with a very fine brush. I'll turn it on and off because to me, it's these little highlights that just really bring most paintings to life. You can see, I mean, it's serviceable. It looks like a painting, but when you turn on those little highlights, those little pings of light, that's what really turns the painting from okay to like, wow, it's starting to seem like it has real life to it. So I actually had a special layer where I added my own strokes. And that's another thing I want to visit here. Don't rely 100% on picking up the colors only from the photograph. At the very end, there are probably going to be little detail areas similar to what I did here that aren't in the original photograph. So this is where you add even some more of yourself into the image by deciding where you want those. I'll turn these on and off one more time. Those weren't exactly in those places at all when I started. I made some of that up. I put some of these highlights on the leaves, which are somewhat reflective, and so it helps to illustrate those leaves as well as brings a little bit of tension to them. What some of these highlights are effectively doing is directing the viewer's eye to parts of the painting. Without it, yes, you'll still do it, but with them, it just gives you specific little notes to be able to direct the viewer's eye to a specific area. When you're working in a layer-wise fashion, it not only preserves the source imagery, it also enables you to focus on increasingly refining the detail as you paint on these individual layers. These layers, and this is very important, act as safety nets that encourage experimentation and promote a sense of painterly fearlessness that serves to make you a better artist. In the previous chapter, we looked at a digital painting technique I refer to as dipping a paintbrush into a photograph. In this chapter, we're going to look at another advanced technique.
Okie doke. We'll look at the other video on another day that he's going to do. It's a little bit different. But that's a slightly different way of working. Instead of what we're doing in this particular lesson is working on a separate layer but painting on top of a photograph. What he's doing is he's taking a photograph and treating the photograph as if it were made of wet oils and using those colors to create first an underpainting, then on layers on top of that to create finer and finer details, depending on how many details he wants will be determined by how many layers he uses. So, are there any questions so far? I want to go back to Photoshop and see if I can't. I was looking at the textbook and see why I couldn't get the results that I wanted with the palette. Any questions? No? We're good? Everybody there? 7 of you or 6 of you were there. 7 participants. No, 6 of you were there. Okay, let me switch again to the Photoshop and see if I can't do a better job with that. Let's come back to that. So I'm going to switch back to the start. And I want to use I just want to look at basic brushes up here. And I want to use a nice soft round brush. Let me see if I can do this. If I can't, then we'll do it again another day. That's not the brush that I wanted. I just wanted a soft round brush here. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and take from red from here on the tube of paint, use an eyedropper tool. And I'm going to switch to mixer brush. And I'm going to go ahead and load the brush. And I'm going to paint, making sure I'm on the middle layer there. Let's try that. I want to make sure that it doesn't reload. So what I want to do now is I'm going to clean the brush. So let's clean the brush and let's load it with, I'm going to load it with yellow this time. Let's see if I can get the right result. And if I can't, then we'll do it again next week. That'll be okay. Let's go back to the mixer brush. And I have yellow now. Now let's see if I get the result. That's what I wanted. It's working beautifully now. So I needed to make sure here that this little brush or this little tool up here, it says clean brush after every stroke, that is turned off. And then I want to make sure that this one, it says load the brush after each stroke. Wait a minute, I don't want to clean it. I just want to load it after each brush stroke. And so now what you're seeing is the red and the yellow mixing together to get the orange. So likewise, what we'll get, I'm going to come back up here again. I'm going to clean the brush. This time, let's go ahead and pick up some blue paint. So again, I'm going to use the eyedropper tool, pick up some blue, and switch back to the mixer brush. And this time I'll paint with a little bit of blue in here. And so from basic color theory, if I mix the blue with the yellow, I'm going to get green. So I'll go ahead now again, and I'm going to clean the, whoops, I didn't want that. I want to clean the brush. I'm going to go back up to the eyedropper tool, and I'm going to select yellow again. And I'm going to go back to the mixer brush, and I'm going to paint again on top of it. And now you're going to see that it actually does turn green. Okay, so you're not getting the pure yellow that we have down here. See that? Nice yellow. Actually, I do want a yellow, but I don't want to clean the brush. So I'm going to come back with a blue. Let me come back. Let's go ahead and clean the brush again. Working a little bit better the first time, but it does look pretty green here. It doesn't look so green here. Let me try again. Let's go ahead and load the brush with blue. And let's go back to our mixer brush. And let's paint a little bit on top here and try to get a greenish color. And you can see it's not the blue that I'm painting with here. Whoops, let me go ahead and clean the brush. Oh, come on, come on. Clean brush, there we go. Let me load the brush again with, let me undo a couple steps. Let me go ahead and load the brush with blue again so you can see the difference. And if I go back with the mixer brush again and paint in here, you can see that it's a much bluer blue, and that when I paint it in here, it's mixing with the yellow to get this dirty green. If I picked a pure yellow from here, it would look a little bit different. But you can see that that's how we're mixing. You also, what I haven't talked about yet either, and that the textbook talks a little bit about, is that there are dry brushes and there are wet brushes, and there are brushes of every type and size that you can create on your own. And that's what this is. This is the 30 pixel brush that I started with. There's a 123 pixel brush. I'm sorry, hold on one second here. My apologies. That's the problem working from home. We just got a package delivered. So from Amazon. Hard knock at the door. So let me go ahead and stop sharing. Let's go back. And again, that's pretty much all I wanted to add today. Do you have any questions about the projects, about the lessons, about the future webinars that we'll have? If there aren't, we can pretty much end this today. Yeah, Homero?
So for this one, we're turning in the paint mix one and the landscape painting.
Right, and you're gonna put that, you are gonna turn those in. In the
On the
past,
Google
I just
Drive
said, you know,
folder.
huh? In the
On the
past, I
Google.
just,
Oh,
in the
sorry.
past, I just said, go ahead. When we were in the classroom, I just said, open them up. Let me see that you finished them and I will check them off. But now what you need to do with the remaining lessons, 10, 11, and 12, and unless there are other lessons that I don't have checked off from you, then what you're gonna do is complete the lessons and you're gonna put them in the folder that you're gonna create inside Google Drive. And then I'm gonna do the same. I'm just gonna look at them and check them off and then we're done.
Okay, and that's all the lessons from 1 through 12?
Well, those are the ones that you'll be responsible for by the end of the semester,
Okay.
okay? So you have until the end of the semester to complete them all.
Okay.
And again, for those of you who didn't participate, Tuesday, just to let you know that in a couple of weeks, the movie poster will be due. So I'm giving you extra time on that. And then after that, we're only gonna do one more assignment. We're only gonna do, and I will give you a choice. You can either do a digital painting, at the time, when we get to that point, I will talk more in greater depth about it and give you options about what you can do. If you want to do a still life, or if you want to do a portrait, or if you want to do whatever, you know, you start with a basic photograph and you go back in, just as he had done with his still life. And you're going to turn a digital photograph into a digital painting. That could be one option. The second one would be the one that I always give for my final project, which is to take an old photograph, or even if it isn't old, a photograph that is damaged in some way, and you're going to have to use what you've learned throughout the semester and to retouch and restore that photograph to its original condition, or something that's even better than original. And there are various ways of doing that. And we will watch some more lynda.com videos on that, and I will show examples. Now, the one example that I do have for this digital painting assignment, let me go ahead and share again. So let's, come on. Why aren't you showing? Hold on here. Let's go back. There we go. I want to share the screen again. And let me go back to my website, if I can remember where it is. Let's go back here. And let's, I don't want that.
That I described as funneling a photo.
There we go. I wanted to go to, you're not seeing windows that I am, and it's just very frustrating. I want to go to, well, I'll just type it in. I'll create a new window, and we'll go to Kirk Miller Art Oh, come on, I didn't want that. There we go. Let's go to Kurt's classes. The one example that I really liked because it kind of reminded me of the days when I was an illustrator. Was this one. My student Avery did this a few semesters ago and then worked from a photograph that digitally enhanced it to turn it into a beautifully illustrated painting. Can talk about this more on another day, but this I think is really, for those of you who are interested in making money, doing commercial illustration or commercial painting, this would be the way to go, or one of the ways that you could pursue something profitably. And the reason being is that you can, you know, if you paint with original watercolors or oils or whatever medium you're happy with, acrylics, once you've completed that painting, you have a single painting and that's it. That's all you have to sell. However, with digital paintings, because they are digital, you can print them and you don't have to print them on paper. You can print them on canvas and stretch them on stretcher bars. And if they're done well, they can look really, really nice. And that would enable you to sell not one, but multiples. And so even if you sold them at $25 a piece, you know, if you sold 10 of them, you know, you'd be doing okay. You'd make a reasonable amount of money, far more than probably what you could earn selling one original painting. So that's something to consider, because there are a number of resources that you would have to sell these works, that they could be put in hotels, you know, in hotel lobbies or hotel rooms, or, you know, business offices and things like that. They buy this sort of work all the time. Not of bar scenes, but you could do your landscapes or your still lifes or abstract paintings and sell them multiple times. So I'll stop sharing that so you can see that. So that's pretty much all I had to say for today. I'm sorry my demo didn't start out as well as I had hoped, but we got it to work. And on Tuesday, we'll work more with taking the digital photograph and working with it as if it were wet oils. And we'll continue with that. And then we'll work on lesson 11 next. But we're gonna go take things a little bit slower. So if there aren't any more questions, I'm going to stop recording. I want to take roll, and then we'll go ahead and call it a day, and I will see everybody Tuesday. Okay. So hold on here. Any questions? No? No? Okay, I'm going to pause.